Welcome back to another edition of the Course Creation Incubator Podcast. I'm Gina Anativia, your host, your bulldog, your cheerleader, here to get you excited about building out your course or your workshop or whatever program you're focused on right now. And I'm hoping I'll give you some helpful marketing and selling tips to help you ultimately build the course-based business of your dreams. And a lot of times when I'm talking to my students about what's holding them back from building their course, a lot of reasons pop up, a lot of feelings pop up. Some of the reasons I get is I don't have the audience, I'm not ready, I've got family commitments, etc. But you know what? I think the fear is really what's behind a lot of these reasons or these things that come up. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. And I just did this one-to-one with an accelerator grad that I hadn't heard from in a couple of months. She had graduated a couple of seasons ago, and we had recently reconnected. So I did a one-to-one with her. I don't do a ton of coaching right now. I'll do it for my accelerator grads because I love that they have the foundation of going through the accelerator. They know how to build their course. They have a path forward. They just need to make a few tweaks to really build momentum. So I was sitting down with this accelerator grad and she said she had a list of questions for me. Great. And as she went through the questions, I realized this is really a list of fears. And I come from a Tony Robbins background. If you've been listening to this podcast, I worked for Tony for years and years. And whenever I hear fear, I think, okay, what's the limiting belief that's behind that fear? And is it a legit fear or is it something that you've been clinging to? And for me too, right? Every time I have a fear, I'm thinking, okay, is this something that I'm just clinging to because I don't want to do it? Or is it a limiting belief around something? It's usually a limiting belief for me. So I'm listening to my grad kind of tick off these different pieces on our list. And I'm thinking, okay, we've got to work through a couple of fears during this session. And it triggered me because I'm thinking, you guys have some fears. This is the season, right? As you're putting together your course, fears are going to come up, doubts. And I want to talk about them today and maybe put the kibosh on them. And if we don't put the kibosh on them entirely, maybe let's minimize them a little bit. So by the way, it's not just this grad. I put out a call for hot seat applications back in the spring, and I'll never forget that I had a potential course creator just list her 12 fears that were going through her head. Like the question was about the question that she had for me, but she took that moment to tell me all the fears and the doubts that were going through her head. So I get it. I get that there's fear behind this process. If there's not fear and doubt, then wow, then you are a truly unique individual. I have fears and doubts when I decided to become an entrepreneur 8 years ago and leave corporate. That was very scary for me. I am certainty driven. I'm working on that every day. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like I didn't have somebody showing me that way. I took the leap and I love that I did it. And I continue to fight through my own fears as well. So I hear you. And just know that even though I've started my entrepreneurial journey years ago, the fears still bubble up. I just have a couple of more tools to help work with them. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, let's talk through those fears. And as we do that, we're going to talk about, is there a limiting belief behind them? And if we can install an alternate belief, yes, we're going to bring in some Tony Robbins as part of this episode. And by the way, that's why I work with my coach, because I know I have fears and I know I have limiting beliefs. I had Patty on the podcast. I'll link to her episode in the show notes. She's always challenging me to bust through my fears and see what's really behind me not taking action. So work with someone. If I would love for you to work with me, but if you're not going to work with me, get a coach, get a mentor to help you along the way. So the first fear I want to talk about is the fear of charging money for your course. Maybe you're someone who says, who am I to say that you've got to put down money for what I have to offer? And I get this from a ton of course creators who a lot of times are putting free, incredible content out there. Without a doubt, at least half of my 6-week accelerators are always putting out great content. They got a podcast, or they're going live consistently in their Facebook group, or they're doing reels every day on Instagram. And I mean just delivering the goods. And then they're not monetizing. They don't have a paid offer. They don't have something they can put out there. They're literally just giving away all this amazing information for free without saying, okay, wait, are you ready to take the next step with me, with my course? Because maybe that fear comes in that who am I to ask for the money? Who am I to ask for that next step? Or I've got people who do one-to-ones, so they'll charge for one-to-ones because they're like, hey, I can charge for a one-to-one because they're getting me one-on-one. They're getting custom answers, right? They're getting my focused attention, but I couldn't possibly charge that for a self-paced course, right? So they're okay with that one-to-one access and charging for that because they see the value, but they don't see the value of an online course or a workshop for all. So that's a limiting belief in my heart. I know that's a limiting belief. If you are delivering value one-on-one, if you're delivering results for someone, then of course you can deliver a transformation and a true result for them with an online course. Now, if you've been delivering incredible value, so say you just got your blog or your podcast up there and you're delivering and you're seeing a few results, like maybe some great comments, people want to do the next step with you. And if you don't put out that paid offer, well, first of all, you don't have a darn business, right? That's first of all. But secondly, you're denying them the opportunity to go deeper with you, right? They want that next step. If you've hooked them with your free content, then they want that process or that system from you. And that's where your paid offer comes in. And for those of you who have one-to-ones and feel like you can't charge for a self-paced course, what if I can't afford your one-to-ones? How do I work with you? I don't work with you, right? You don't get to scale. This person doesn't get to access your greatness. It's a lose-lose. So if you have a fear behind charging people, if you are one of the people who are giving everything away for free and you know who you are, if you're listening right now, I want you to challenge yourself to put out an offer. I want you to ask yourself, what if I could go deeper and actually charge someone and bring this relationship to another level? What would this mean for me? What would this mean for my people? All right, so ask yourselves those questions and install an alternate belief. So instead of being fearful of asking for money, say to yourself, this is a great way to deepen my relationship with my people. Let's move on to fear number 2. They won't buy. Yep, there's another one that comes up. I know, it's scary. I'm going to do all of this to create my course, and I'm going to hear some crickets. And yes, I have seen that out there. I'm not going to go on this podcast and say that every single course creator I've seen launch has sold 1 million courses. It's just not the truth. That's BS. This is why we want to make sure we have buyers lined up as much as possible. This is why validating that you have buyers is so important. This is a fear that I feel like we can take care of. Let's do our steps, our homework, our due diligence as much as possible to make sure that this doesn't happen, that you've got people interested in buying your course. Typically, when I see a great course validation process, or in other words, interviews, vetting, you've talked to some of your best potential people, you've asked them a series of questions about what's truly meaningful for them and what they will buy, that typically will lead to some kind of conversions. Now, if you have done your homework and dialed in who your audience is, you know your potential customer, you have an idea of what they want to buy from you. And this might be something that doesn't align with what you want to create, by the way. So I've had course creators who come back and say, well, this is what my people said they would pay for on one hand, but I really want to create this other thing on the other hand. And that's when I said, this is the hard truth. You got to make a decision. If you create the other thing, what you're really passionate about, you might not sell. So going through the validation process is important because you're doing your homework to figure out what they really want. And is it aligned with your vision and how you want to move forward? That's why I start the 6-week accelerator with a validation process, because I know how important this is. Whenever I'm talking to a peer, like say another course creation coach, and we have a back and forth, and we talk about, if a student launched and they didn't do as well as he or she liked, the first question we always ask each other is, what did the validation look like? How deep did the person go? What were the results? What was talked about? What happened here? So if you want to squash that fear that they're not going to buy, do your homework. Really do your due diligence around finding out what people want. What does the market really want from you? Okay, the third fear, and by the way, I could have gone through a dozen fears, right? I had that list from the hot seat application. I just wanted to narrow it down to 3 that you and I can really squash or minimize together. And then maybe on another episode, we'll talk more about some other fears. You guys can write in and tell me what else is on your minds. So the third and final fear is that my course won't live up to other people's courses, or I won't live up to the competition. Or another way to put this really is I won't stand out from the competition. So I'm kind of I'm cheating a little bit, right? I'm combining a few fears into this one. So if you feel like your course is going to be inferior and not as good as you like, this is where you're in control of the transformation you're providing. When it comes down to what makes a great course, a lot of times it hinges on the transformation and how important and vital it is for your student. And I'm telling you, if you deliver on that transformation and that course promise, it will be a great course. If you put in the materials that your student really wants and provides them with a journey, and I mean a simplified and not overwhelming journey to the transformation, it will be a great course. Now, your handouts might not be professional grade handouts. Look, I have a designer, right? I've got my hubby doing my handouts. So I'm going to have amazing looking handouts. That's appropriate for where I am right now. You might start with simple looking handouts as part of your minimum viable product. That is great. That does not mean your course is inferior. That means you're getting it out to market, and then you can update from there. And then as far as standing out from the competition, I think sometimes we set ourselves up for failure because we do the comparison game. Oh, my course needs to look like Jenna Kutcher's or Marie Forleo's or Amy Porterfield's. Don't set yourself up for failure. Don't do that comparison BS game. Your course will not be inferior if you're delivering on your promise. So focus on that and what your students need, and then do your best to create the materials that will support them. You know when inferior courses happen, by the way? They happen when we don't focus on the student. Inferior courses happen when we don't focus on the student. For example, when I look at a course that has 2-hour-long videos that aren't broken up, I don't even know where to start. I don't know where to grab the value from a course like that. That's when inferior courses happen. Now, you're not going to do that because you've been listening to this podcast. You know how to write great scripts, how to thoughtfully break up your content, and write great handouts that really move the needle for your students. You don't have to live that fear because you're here. You're committed. You've been listening to the incubator. Now, other people not listening to this podcast, maybe. So let's just squash that fear right now. All right, those are just 3 of the fears. If you are experiencing other doubts, I want you to write into me. Course Creation Boutique on Instagram, or hit me up on LinkedIn. Let me know how you're doing and what might be holding you back, and we'll work through it together. Next week, you and I are talking about pricing strategies because a lot of questions have come up, and I've seen some courses getting discounted. And discounting courses, I want you to be thoughtful about that. So we'll talk more about that next week. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss one single episode. And until next week, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.